Hi, I'm Judith Dreyer. Thank you for joining me for my podcast series, The Holistic Nature of Us. My intent is to take us, you and I, into a better understanding of the concepts behind our holistic nature and how that ties directly to the holistic nature of the world around us. How can we connect the dots in practical ways that we are nature and nature is in us? I will be featuring authors and educators, practitioners, and others whose passion for this earth helps us create bridges. We'll see what's trending, what's relevant to our world today, not just for land use, but to connect the dots between ourselves and nature. It's time for practical action and profound interchange so our natural world is valued once again. And today I'm delighted to welcome back Ellen Moyer. Ellen Moyer is a PhD whose mission is to help preserve the environment and promote a healthier way for us to inhabit this earth. She is the author of numerous publications, including Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves, How to Thrive with Creating a Sustainable World. Good morning, Ellen. It's a pleasure to have you back here today. How are you?
Hi, Judith. Thanks. I'm great, and I'm very grateful for being on your show again. So thanks so much.
You are welcome. I invited Ellen back because I wanted to touch upon the holistic implications of our socioeconomics with contributing to sustainability or not. And today we're going to focus on our food system. And there's many facets we can talk about, but hopefully we'll get to a few of them and show the socioeconomic downfall of some of our current practices, as well as highlight the positive things that are taking place in our food world. So Ellen, how would you like to start?
Well, I think a good place to start is just to put the whole subject into context. And I need to mute my computer so that when emails come in, there's no beeping. So, food is how we fit into the entire web of life. And so it's incredibly basic. It's so important to any organism's survival, including our own. And, when you look at a lot of animals out there, they spend a good part of their day looking for food and taking care of that aspect of life. We today are lucky in that others provide a lot of our food, and it frees up our time to do other things. But the forces that have been taking care of our food have been favoring quantity and profits over quality and what makes us healthy. So our food system has really gotten off track to the point that it is endangering our very survival. And so we can talk about some of that, but also one reason I love this subject is because everybody participates in this issue, and everybody makes a difference, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, whether they try to or not, because what we choose to have for our next meal has incredible implications, not only for our own health and well-being, but also implications for the climate, for our soil, for water quality, air quality, our forests, just really every aspect of our environment. So it's a great place, food is a great place for people to start to be more aware of what they're doing and the implications of what they're doing, and to also make a difference. So that's why I'm so gung-ho about this subject.
Well, that's a great place to begin. Carolyn Myss, in her recent work...
Do you want me to talk about some things people can do to make a difference?
I do, because I want to get back to the power of choice. I like that idea, Ellen, of focusing on food. And for me, I listen to Carolyn Myss a lot. She's one of my favorite authors. And she's talking a lot about today on our power of our choice, and we make 100 choices in any given minute, but we don't stop and think about the long-term, far-reaching implications that has for all of us. Because if we're connected, then every choice we make has some kind of connection to the world around us. So I would love you to give us an example of playing it forward.
Yeah, okay. Well, there are a lot of things we can do in the area of food that help our own health and well-being and also help the planet. And maybe one of the most important choices is how much meat are we going to eat? If we cut back on meat, say just cut back one meal a week on the meat we eat, we are going to be helping in so many areas. And I'll probably forget some of them, but I'll try to list as many as I can.
That's okay. We want to hear you, play that kind of example forward, so it's practical.
Yeah. So if we eat less meat, then chances are we're going to be helping our own health, because most Americans, most affluent Americans, eat too much meat for their own health. So there are many ways that helps our health. We're going to help the climate, because meat production is the most damaging industry there is on many fronts, including climate change, because of all the land that's cleared for growing the food for the for the animals that we turn into meat. It's going to, and I'm focusing mostly on industrial meat production.
Right.
When I say it's going to help water quality, because we won't be putting so many fertilizer nutrients and pesticides into our water system. Also pesticides and other neurotoxins that hurt everything, including ourselves. We will be helping the soil. We'll be helping forests, because land is cleared for animal grazing. I mean, a lot of the forest cutting in the Amazon is for growing beef, for example. We'll be helping air quality, because things like glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup used on many of the food crops for farm animals, gets into our air, our water, everything else. And we'll probably be helping our finances, because meat is generally more expensive than other foods. And we will be driving our food system in the right direction by signaling what we want by voting with our dollars. So I think that kind of covered it. So I bet a lot of people never thought that what's on the end of their fork made such a difference, but it really, really does.
Well, that's interesting. I had some research that I did concerning bacon and pork. And if we play that forward, and I'm talking about factory farmed pigs, there's terrible pictures on the internet about how terribly they're treated as a species, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, we don't know how they're medicated and how extensive that is in that industry. So that gets into our food chain. That's number two. And number three, their poo. They have huge poo farms in North Carolina, and they're running out of physical space to actually dump the poo. And unfortunately, those folks that thought they were having a nice retirement, or their livelihood was down there, they've been living down in those neck of the woods, the odor from these poo farms is so bad it's completely dropped the property value. So economically they're hit very hard, because their property value has plummeted because they're next to a poo farm. So that's something that my class participants, students, don't stop to think about when we purchase something in that way. Do you have any other information on that?
Oh, completely. Manure in a sustainable, healthy kind of farming rejuvenates the soil and adds organic matter and nutrients back into the soil. when it's spread out over a large area. But when they cram all these animals into a tiny area in a building, never see the light of day, never get fresh air, they're just driven crazy. Their waste is also concentrated, and it has a huge effect on groundwater, surface water, and quality of life for the people living around them. And as far as all the horrible hormones, antibiotics, and things given to the animals because they are crammed into small, filthy conditions, that ends up in our food. And milk, typically, like cow's milk, that people think is so great for their kids, if it's not organic, it's full of like 20 different drugs, steroids, growth hormones, really nasty stuff that has health effects for us. So, one of the main lessons that I've learned and that I tried to incorporate into my book is that when we hurt the environment, and that includes other living things, we hurt ourselves. And it's not just some indirect thing, it's directly. We directly hurt ourselves. So there is sort of a divine justice to all this, but in our own self-interest, we need to get away from this like warfare mentality where we're always fighting things. Andrew Kimbrell, an attorney who heads this really great organization, the Center for Food Safety, talks about the delusion of extermination. We think we can just get rid of what we don't want, such as like microorganisms, killing them with antibiotics, or weeds, killing them with Roundup. And we think we can do that, but we can't because nature bats last and nature bats 1,000. So we need to give up this kind of immature warfare mentality that we have toward everything, including our own food, and instead have a more cooperative mindset where we're trying to work with nature and nurture things rather than destroy them. And food is a perfect example of that.
Well, that is a great example, and you talk about how we've had a more command and control kind of attitude, which is immature because it doesn't take into account the long-term implications of what we're doing. It's in the more of the here and now. I want it, I got to have it, I'm going to get it kind of mentality. And what we're trying to do through your book, through the writings that you do, and other ways, through this podcast series, is to try to grow a mentality of connecting with nature and collaborating with nature.
Yeah, and we're healthier, we have more fun, and it's good for our economy. The healthcare costs that we are paying are skyrocketing faster than just about everything else. And a lot of it is due to the crappy food we're eating. If you think about it, most of the chronic diseases that we are suffering from and that conventional medicine is not doing a very good job with are self-inflicted ailments or diseases strongly linked to our food. One example is overweight and obesity. 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese, and this leads to things like diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and the big killers that are killing us. And the news is not much better for kids. Kids are our future, and our kids are not healthy. There's a lot of obesity, diabetes, autism, depression, suicide. It's not like we are we're impacting nature negatively, but it's in order to have a healthier, happier lifestyle. No, we are suffering as much or more than nature with all these ailments. Autoimmune disease is going through the roof. Heart disease was unheard of practically in 1900, and now it's the biggest killer. We need to connect the dots here. And
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's a complex subject, isn't it? Because when you talk about the power of choice, so we're on the road and we're on a highway, which I just was yesterday, and what do we have for choices when we're on the road other than fast food? And even if we stop at a restaurant, a popular restaurant is not necessarily buying the best food because they have to mass produce their menu, and we forget about the fact that that those things occur because we don't see them. They're not in front of us.
Yeah, yeah, we have to plan ahead. People like Dr. Mark Hyman, who's I think at least a 10-time New York Times #1 best-selling author, talking about health. He's on the road all the time. And he says you just have to plan ahead and bring your own stuff, or go to Whole Foods, which are usually close by to wherever you're going. It takes effort. And there's a lot of pressure from people if you go to a family gathering and you want to eat uncontaminated food, well, that's threatening to some people, and they're going to say, come on, just have some cake, you'll like it. And there is this whole thing of breaking bread with people, and sharing food is a very social thing. And sometimes that pressure makes you succumb and eat food that is bad for you. So it takes strength to resist that and be an example for people to say, hey, not talking about it, but just eating healthy food and being healthy and looking healthy, and they go, hey, you look great. How you do this? And then you can tell them, and then they'll be inspired. And it takes more effort to go against the grain and bring your own stuff. When I travel, often I'll bring a lot of organic nuts because they're small, they're compact, and they're nutritious. And often I'll just have almonds or something for lunch. But it gets easier and easier the more of us there are there, because then there are more Whole Foods around. There are more food co-ops, healthier choices on menus. So we help drive the transition when we say, hey, I'm not participating in this poisonous food system. I'm doing something else. And thank God we have organic food and have things gradually moving in the right direction.
We do, and everything does take some time. There's some great sociological data that says that once a movement begins, it can take they actually have it figured out, 10 to 15 years before it starts becoming mainstream. So it's not just Whole Foods anymore. We actually have supermarkets that are creating their own product line, buying organic. So there is a tremendous need for more organic growers, for example, out there.
And I didn't mean to be plugging one company. I guess it's more from experience. When I was traveling much more than I am now, wherever I was, I would just put Whole Foods into my phone, and it would take me to something 10 or 15 minutes away, rather than like researching what else is out there. I would just do that. So
yes, I totally understand that can be an easy way to do it. And like you, when I'm on the road, I bring my own snacks, I bring my own fruit. I don't buy usually on the road. I'll buy a bottle of water or something like that if I have to, but that's about it. And even that's another choice that gets us into trouble, because you can't get a liquid easily that's been purified in some way that's not in a plastic bottle. From what I've read, the ice machines and water machines at some of the fast food restaurants are extremely dirty. So if you don't want to use their paper cup, which is more biodegradable, you really have to buy a bottle of water.
Yeah, and don't think that the water is clean because some of the plastic chemicals have dissolved from the bottle into the water, and that is not good. And in fact, Dr. Mark Hyman has said that each American has roughly 2 pounds of plastic in their body.
Oh, that's an incredible statistic. Wow. So again, we have a lot of plastic. The dot I like to connect is what my natives said to me, my native elders taught me, is that what's in our bodies and the earth, what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. So if we look at the incredible pollution of plastics that we've created on this planet, it doesn't surprise me that we have an enormous amount within our own physical structure.
Yeah, and actually there's another thing I should have put on the list. You know, when we eat trashy food, chances are there's more plastic packaging, that goes with it, and other packaging. You know, if you buy a squash or something at the market, hopefully organic squash, it doesn't come in synthetic packaging. It's got its own packaging.
Right.
So yeah, that should be added to the list.
Right, and I'd love to be able to bring my own containers into stores for their bulk section because they're still using plastics for bulk.
Yeah, I know.
And stores haven't. I think the West Coast is more progressive than we are in some ways on the East Coast. And I think they do have stores where you can do that very easily. There might be a few here and there on the East Coast, but it's not a widespread mentality of, come on, we got to stop doing this.
Yeah. But the counter movement is growing, and I find it very gratifying to look at the wins that we make, and things are heading in the right direction. But wow, all the suffering in the meantime, all the children. I mean, kids are born with hundreds of toxic chemicals in their blood before they even take their first breath. Things like DDT and lead, arsenic, mercury, just really nasty. So our kids are at such a disadvantage, and their exposure to toxic chemicals like Roundup in everything practically that we eat.
Well, on that level, what I didn't realize when I was doing some research in the GMO issue, because I'm in the field, but I didn't understand some of the implications of how they're created, etc. What I discovered is that antibiotics are used as adjuvants with the glyphosate chemical. And that's what they drive into the cell of a plant. So if it's a GMO seed, all of that, it's not just glyphosate that gets into the seed, it's the adjuvants, it's the additives. And then if they spray the fields on top of it with more of the glyphosate chemical, the antibiotics are also going into our soil, which there can be some uptake with that, or animals are grazing, etc., and it still gets into our food chain.
Oh, definitely, and it kills soil microorganisms, so it kills the soil. It gets into us, and the way this works is it can make holes in our gut, and that can let undigested food directly into our bloodstream, and our immune system goes nuts, says, what the hell is this? This does not look good. I'm going to attack it. And that's probably part of why there's so much autoimmune disease now too. And there's so much corruption around pesticides, and especially glyphosate. I'm reading a really good book on that by a reporter from Reuters who is talking about all the sleaze and corruption over getting glyphosate not to be tested in food. It's the most heavily used pesticide in all of human history, but it is not in the list of things that food samples are tested for because of lobbying by the manufacturers, and they do things like they have papers written and put in peer-reviewed journals, and authors sign things saying, "I was not paid by anyone to write this article." But come to find out, a lot of these so-called peer-reviewed articles are ghost-written by people being paid by the chemical companies that make these products. It's really incredible. But the truth is coming out in a democracy, messy though it may be.
Yeah.
Ultimately, things come out, but just think of all the damage done in the meantime. I mean, in the Midwest, in a lot of the growing areas, there is glyphosate detected in rain samples, air samples. It's in most of our blood, and it's really nasty. And it makes holes in our bodies, and who knows what it does to our brains. Probably not good.
Well, again, we've got that connection about what we do to the soil, for example, with the microorganisms. And if these particular ingredients are killing them off, then they're also doing the same thing in our gut with the food that we ingest. And what Dr. Seneff out of MIT is showing us is that not only does it poke holes in the gut, but it actually helps support the more detrimental populations in our intestine that are kept at a certain amount. It increases them, and it actually decreases the good guys, so to speak, in our gut. And that's where we open the door to other disease happening, just depending on our biological inheritance. Some people may get diabetes, and other people might get more rheumatoid arthritis, for example. So it seems to be we've created this cycle. So what I'd like to do is, can you give us 3 examples of where the positive things that are happening that you see with the work that you do?
Yeah. First, can I just add one thing to what you just said?
Sure, of course.
I watched a talk of Deepak Chopra the other day. It was from March 2018. And he pointed out that the human body, we get about 25,000 genes from our mother and father, but we acquire 2 million to 20 million additional genes from microorganisms that colonize our bodies, mostly in the gut, but in our skin and all over the place. And he says that in many parts of the industrialized world, we have lost 30% of the microbiome. That's what these microorganisms are called, due to things like pesticides and things like that. And, we have outsourced a lot of our activities to microorganisms. We have fewer genes than a rice plant.
I've heard that. Yeah, I don't think we're aware of that in general.
Because we live with these microorganisms, and they do a lot of our functions, of breaking down foods, fighting pests and things like that. And Deepak Chopra says this is a big threat to our very survival, because we're losing a lot of our genes by things like pesticides. So it's even worse than we might imagine. But as far as good things happening, well, I think the increasing demand for organically grown food is one example of that. And another is, farmers markets and community-supported agriculture and all these kind of local forms of food production are skyrocketing. So more and more people are getting on board, and they're saying, I'm not going to feed my kid poison. Come on, I want to be a good parent. So the momentum really is growing. And then a third is something you mentioned a minute ago, and that is conventional supermarkets have increasingly more organically grown food, and that is only because of consumer demand.
Correct, yes.
If we weren't saying, I want this, they would not provide it. They will sell what we want to buy. It's a direct thing there, and that's why we have such immense power, because we create 2/3 of the U.S. economy with our purchases, and people do what we pay them to do. So we are calling the shots, even if we don't know it.
That's true. And I'm going to go back to the power of choice. I think if we really were to sit down and look at our choices we make for our families on any given day, what practical action can we make today? One simple thing can we make today that would actually have positive consequences instead of perpetuating a system that we know really isn't working, and it has a lot of issues that impact us in many, many, many ways. So thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate that. That's a good way to leave. Good way to end.
Okay, can we just end with one more concrete thing people can do?
Absolutely.
Okay, one thing you can do is go in your kitchen and just look at each thing, and anything that has an ingredient you've never heard of and can't pronounce, or that has partially hydrogenated oil or MSG or high fructose corn syrup, just throw all that stuff away. Don't give it away. You're not doing anybody any favors. Just throw it away. And then next time you go shopping, get good stuff instead of that junk.
Right. Label reading is really what you're suggesting, is to get us more actively label reading.
And the best thing to do really is to buy food that doesn't have labels.
Yes. To make the bulk of our diet those fresh foods, hopefully organic, that supports our biology and was meant to support our biology.
Yeah. And then by doing that, we support the environmental biology out there and our life support system.
Yes. Very good. Well, Ellen, again, it's been a pleasure to have you back. I still would love to invite you again for another aspect of the work that you do. But for today, I'm going to just end with that your story, Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves, does make a case for hope and optimism, and you offer many practical solutions that we can take individually and collectively to green our technology, green our economy, strengthen our democracy, and create social equality. So I highly recommend your book. Could you please end with your contact information?
Oh, sure. Yeah, my website has everything, and it's ellenmoyerphd.com, and I'll spell that because there are a lot of ways to spell Moyer. ELLENMOYERPHD.com. And thank you, Judith, for having me back. I so appreciate the opportunity, and I love your series. I've been listening to all the podcasts. They're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So I'm going to end today with saying thank you to Ellen and for all of you for joining us for her talk and practical advice. This is Judith Dreyer, the author of At the Garden's Gate book and blog, and my book is available through my website, which is www.judithdreyer.com, as well as other distribution arms such as Amazon. And I'd like to remind all of you to please like and share the podcast. Let's get the word out. I want to end with a quote from Paul Hawken, who's an environmentalist and author, who reminds us, sustainability, ensuring the future life on Earth, is an infinite game, the endless expression on behalf of all. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your day.